Well, let's talk about a trucking manufacturer that's been around almost as long as trucks and is probably the most innovative truck manufacturer that ever existed. I'm not talking about Volvo or Freightliner or any of them. I am talking about Kenworth. Alright guys, so we're going to talk about Kenworth, a company that I think is the most innovative company over the years. When people think Kenworth, they always think, you know, W900. But this company has done so much for aerodynamics, all kinds of other innovations that I just haven't seen from the other companies that I've done. Also, if you own a Kenworth that was built between 1969 and 2002, your truck may have been painted by a serial killer. And in the later years, if your truck is a later year, like 2000 to 2002, the paint from your truck may be the reason he was caught. We'll talk about that too. But let's get into how the company started. And it was actually founded in 1923 by Henry Kent and Edgar K. Worthington. And they started the company to try to solve the problems that Pacific Northwest loggers had moving their loads through rough terrains. So move on to 1927. This was a big year for Kenworth because in 1927, Kenworth's production was increased from 2 vehicles per week to 3. Now that doesn't sound like a big jump, but think about it. That's a 50% increase. You know, I mean, that's pretty good. And they were actually able to do this because, because well, Harry Kent was named president that year, and they moved the factory to the corner of Yale and Mercer Street in Seattle. And this allowed for the bigger production. In 1927, the company also started producing in Canada to avoid import taxes. Now, up here, I did the story of Freightliner, and Freightliner did something very similar to that. In fact, pretty much the exact same thing as that, to avoid import taxes, which the way I understand don't exist anymore. They were later abolished, those, I guess they'd be tariffs. So in that same year, Kenworth also delivered its first Canadian assembled truck. So in 1929, Edgar Worthington retired. This left Kenworth worthless, as they still are today. Of course, I'm joking, guys. You know, I sitting in Peterbilt, I got to throw a low blow, but I love Kenworths. So, but by 1930, Kenworth was producing 250 trucks per year. And in 1931, Kenworth entered the world of fire trucks, and this was to offset the losses that they were incurring because of the Great Depression. So here's the first level of innovation. Although diesel engines were used, diesel and gas engines were used, in 1933, Kenworth was the first company to use diesel engines as standard equipment. They also were the first to use vertical exhausts. And they used this in conjunction with a, let me see here, I lost my place here, with their 4-cylinder, 100 horsepower Cummins engine. As far as I know, until just recently, you know, in the recent, I guess, within the last 20 years when the PACCAR engine came out, I don't believe Peterbilt and Kenworth had ever offered an engine. There were so many good choices out there. And this shows that even at the beginning, they were using Cummins. And yeah, I will definitely do a story on Cummins engines here in the future. But in 1935, to accommodate all the weight and size regulations, they were the first, some more innovation, they were the first to offer aluminum cabs, aluminum hubs, and aluminum bumpers. And most other manufacturers said this was going to fail miserably, and you know, once it didn't, they soon followed suit. In 1936, Kenworth produced the 516, its first cab-over truck. So in 1937, Henry Kent passed away suddenly at the age of 55 from a heart attack. And this obviously left the company without leadership, and he was quickly replaced by the president of Boeing, Philip Johnson. So in 1940, Kenworth introduced their needle nose 500 series. This workhorse truck was their flagship for many years. So something interesting that Kenworth did that I guess nobody else has ever done, I don't know when they stopped doing this, but Kenworth engineers were required to actually work in their customer's field. Like whether it was logging or whether it was concrete, they actually went out and personally dealt with their customers hand in hand to see what was going on, what the problems were, and how they were able to fix them. And this alone made Kenworth a leader in the industry. But Kenworth, like every other vehicle manufacturer, chipped into the World War II effort. They made the 6-wheel drive M1 records, and they also made components for the B-17 and B-29 planes. So then in 1944, Phil Johnson died from a sudden stroke. And when he when he died, the sole owners of the company were Phil Johnson's wife, Harry Kent's wife, and another unknown person within the company. And none of these three had any interest in owning the company. And in 1945, Kenworth was sold and became a subsidiary of the Pacific Car and Foundry Company, later renamed PACCAR, which they're still owned by today. In 1947, Kenworth offered its first sleeper. It was a separate unit that connected to the cab. They also released the new cab over, the 500 series, later nicknamed the Bullnose. In 1951, Kenworth built its 10,000th truck. And in 1956, KW introduced the 900 series to replace the 500 series. A 900 series that we all know very well. In 1959, Kenworth became the sister company to Peterbilt when Pacific Car and Foundry bought Peterbilt. And again, it still remains that way today. In 1963, KW introduced the W900, W for Worthington, and the K900, K for Kent. It quickly renamed the K900 the K100. And in 1964, Kenworth opened a new plant in Kansas City, Missouri. And the way I understand it, that plant was open until 1986, and at one point was producing more trucks than anybody else. In 1965, the W900 model became the W900A. It had a longer hood to allow for larger engines and better cooling systems. So, obviously, over the years, trucks have always had to adjust as the engines got bigger to different cooling. So in 1968, Kenworth went down under and opened a plant in Bayswater, Australia. And it was the first time that they had started making right-hand drive trucks. And I believe, I don't know, I know I have a lot of fans from down under, whether it be down New Zealand, Australia. I got some friends from down there. I believe Kenworth is still a huge manufacturer down there. I believe I actually see more American trucks made by Kenworth down there than anybody else, and I believe they even have some of their own models. So in 1969, Kenworth built their 50,000th truck. Also in 1969, they hired Gary Ridgway in Washington to work in their paint department. We'll get to that later. In 1971, the VIT interior was released. It was actually a special edition truck, which later in Kenworth now it's basically the VIT interior, which stands for Very Important Trucker. It was released originally into the K100, and Kenworth produced a special VIT K100 for Evel Knievel. In 1974, Kenworth opened its Chillicothe, Ohio plant, which I happen to know is still open today. So, in 1976, this is huge, okay? This is huge as far as I'm concerned. As a tall truck driver, this is huge. In 1976, more innovation, Kenworth introduced the first ever stand-up sleeper. The new stand-up sleeper offered 7 square feet of extra headroom and was called the Aerodine. So the same year, they had the limited edition bicentennial edition that was made with the Aerodine sleepers, which is just an incredible edition. Every now and then you'll see one at a truck show or something. I've seen some remakes, but I believe, I can't remember where I was that I actually saw an original. And but in 1977, the W900A was featured in Smokey and the Bandit, and the W900A was previously featured in the TV show Moving Out. In 1979, BJ and the Bear premiered using a K100 Aerodine. Oh, by the way, Bear is a monkey, not a bear. In 1982, the W900B and the K100E were introduced. The biggest noticeable difference in these were the rectangular headlights, although they still offered the round. I did not know that they still offered the round when they came out with that. But again, the new models allowed for much larger cooling systems. So in 1985, Kenworth did one of the most innovative things ever in trucking. In 1985, at the Mid-American Truck Show, Kenworth unveiled the T600, a new innovative aerodynamic truck. The T600 improved aerodynamics by 50%. How crazy is that? It actually showed that 50% aerodynamic increase increased fuel mileage over the W900 by 20%. A 20% gain. And it was a pretty good looking truck. I always liked the T600. Of course, also called the Anteaters. By the end of 1985, the T600 accounted for 40% of Kenworth sales. That meant it was a huge success. In 1985, Kenworth also released the Liberty Edition and adopted the slogan, "The World's Best." In 1986, Kenworth released the T800, which is basically a W900 with a setback axle, which became huge in, vocational industries, construction, things like that. And I got to look into it. I was going to look into it, and I really couldn't find much out. I believe the T800 may be the longest running truck. It's at least the longest running truck I can remember. I mean, you look at one from the 1980s till the most recent ones, I don't think they make them anymore. I think they did change the model number and change the headlights a little bit. But they basically did not change. The interiors changed. I drove one for a while. I think it's a great truck. I love it. If you want a W900 but you need some maneuverability, that's a truck for you. So in 1989, KW updated the T600 with the T600A. The new version had aero mirrors, curved windshield, and full fairings to improve the aerodynamics even further. All right, guys, here's what you've been waiting for. In 1990, the W900L was introduced. W900L was basically a W900B with a 10-inch longer hood. I did not know that the L was 10 inches longer than the original B. I have a friend who has a beautiful W900B. Still works too. I'll throw the picture up here. This one's for you, Jim, because he works real hard on that truck. But I did not know that the L was actually 10 inches longer. And you know what they say about guys with longer hoods? They can't turn corners as well. Get your mind out of the gutter. We're talking about trucks here. Jeez. In 1993, Kenworth introduced the Aero Cab 60-inch sleeper, which was a sleeper integrated into the truck. So basically, like my sleeper, I mean, they use much bigger holes now than they used to, but, this isn't integrated into the truck, whereas that was totally integrated, which is the way most trucks are now. In 1993, they also introduced the Studio Sleeper. It was the largest sleeper in the industry at 74 inches. A lot thought you were going to say studio sleepers are 86 inches. No, the original ones weren't, because the original sleepers, although they had just come out with 60-inch integrated that year, the original 84 or 86-inch sleepers were not integrated. So it was actually only 74 inches, and then the part that hung over the front, it basically was over the cab and was a storage area up there. Which you can tell if you look at them and you know what you're looking for. But in 1996, Kenworth introduced the T2000. This truck had a wider cab and an aerodynamic improvements, and it really was exactly the sister truck to the Peterbilt 387. Pretty much the exact same truck, except when engineers built the T2000, apparently they forgot to put headlights in it. So when they realized this, they just took a real big hole saw, drilled holes in the bumper, and put headlights in there. Sorry, if you're a T2000 lover, I'm sorry to make fun of your truck. But in 1998, they introduced the 86-inch Studio Aero Cab. So now is when they integrated it. Not much changed about the sleeper, except now it's integrated into the truck. So a big hole basically was cut up here to make it all bigger and you know, much nicer to get out of the driver's seat into the sleeper. So yeah, let me see here. There we go. So in 2001, authorities arrested Gary Ridgway at Kenworth. So Gary Ridgway was known as the Green River Killer and had a very, very long reign as a serial killer. In fact, in the end, it was proven that he killed at least 48 women. He was hired by Kenworth in 1969 and was arrested at Kenworth in 2001. And the reason they finally caught him, apparently he was very good at what he did. The reason they finally caught him is because they were finally able to identify an unknown, unknown something in the fibers, and you know, through advancements in technology, they were finally able to identify it as paint from a Kenworth. It was a paint that only Kenworth used, or I guess in that Washington area, only Kenworth used it. And he was arrested, and yep, 48. I believe originally he was arrested for 4 murders, and then it just kept adding up. He is still alive today, and he is one of the world's biggest serial killers ever. But in 2006, Kenworth introduced the T660. The T660 had a bigger radiator. Let me switch. Yeah, had a bigger radiator. It was supposed to be more aerodynamic than the T600, and eventually would take place of the T600. Let me go back here a bit to something I missed. In 2002, Kenworth introduced the extended cab day cab, allowing for 6 more inches of interior space in the day cab. That is something that fat guys that are 6'5" tall really like. It really made driving a day cab a whole lot nicer. So in 2010, Kenworth introduced the T700. The T700 was a very wide cab truck. I remember when they came out, I kind of liked them. I kind of thought they were ugly from the outside because they were so big. But the interior, I really loved. It had like a 3-piece, like cockpit style interior. I mean, it was so wide. You know, I liked it. I don't even know how long they made them for. You don't see many of them on the road. Never really did. I don't think it was ever really a very big hit as compared to the 660, which was out at the time. 2 years later, in 2012, the T680 was introduced to be more aerodynamic and eventually replaced the T660 and the T700. So the T680 replacing the T660, I always thought was a big mistake. And actually it was 2016, I believe, is when they made the last T660s. The reason I thought it was a big mistake only was because the 660 was a real good owner-operator truck. You know, it had you could get the 84-inch studio sleeper. The cab was a little bit narrower. It had the Basically had a W900 interior in it. It was just, I was disappointed to see it go. I'm not a 680 hater. I don't hate the 680. I just always loved that 660. I was really sad to see that go. But in 2021, oh, I'm sorry. In 2018, Kenworth introduced the W990. Love them or hate them, you know, I'm a W900 lover. I don't love the W990, although I have seen some real nice ones. But yeah, love them or hate them, they're here. I was surprised it was 2018. One of the reasons I don't necessarily love it is because it doesn't seem like the interior is near as nice as a W900, much like the new 589, right? Yeah, 589 Peterbilt's interior is pretty much a 579 interior, and not near as well built as the flagship trucks of the past. That's my opinion. Take that for what you will. In 2021, Kenworth introduced the next generation T680, and I love this truck. I love this truck, and I love the Peterbilt at the same time. Released the 579, the next generation. I love them. Every time I see them, I think they're beautiful trucks. If I had to choose between one, I think the Kenworth looks a little bit better from the front end, a little bit. I would probably go with the Peterbilt because they offer a bigger sleeper. They offer the 80-inch Ultra Loft, but both beautiful trucks. I really love them. In 2023, Kenworth celebrated a 100 years with an anniversary edition. And show a picture here. And so this year they came out with the super truck. People have seen it online. If you haven't seen my video about it, look at it up here. Because this shows that Kenworth is continuing with innovation. I know people hate it because it's very weird, but watch my video where I talk about the innovation, the incredible innovation, things that they've been trying to do for over 20 years, they've now been successful at doing. So it doesn't mean it has to go in that weird body style with the center drive and everything, but they have made huge advancements. It's just the innovation in this truck is incredible. I can't talk about it enough, so go watch that video. But hey guys, I did this mainly because I just did the video about the super truck. Plus, I was in the Pacific Northwest for the first time. I was in Washington for the first time last week, and got me thinking about Kenworth and Gary Ridgway. I've actually listened to an audiobook about his story and everything. But yeah, so I figured it was time. We got to do the Kenworth story, and it's a company that I forever have thought was super innovative. I remember I was only 6 years old when the T600 came out. But, you know, I lived for trucks, and my dad actually worked for a company that was buying some of them new, and I just thought they were the coolest thing ever. And now that I know what made them even better, you know, about the aerodynamics, it was just a super innovative company. But thanks a lot, guys. As always, sorry it's been a while since I did a history video, but took a little bit. But anyway, yeah, if you like this video, like, subscribe, share. You can also reach or comment below. I read all the comments, but if you don't want to comment, you can also reach me at finchresources@gmail.com. You can also, please go over and join the Facebook page of Trucking Resource. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but I do a lot more on Facebook. And a lot of times I put out what's coming up next or what I'm doing, things like that, and I interact you know, a lot with everybody. I love the interaction with the comments and on the Facebook. So thanks a lot, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the next one.